So I think metabolism is something that gets thrown out a lot, and we're all looking for ways to increase it. Men generally have a higher metabolic rate than women due to a higher proportion of muscle mass. Again, this is a generalization. That's not true for everybody. Everyone wants to know sort of that one thing they should eat to increase their metabolic rate. And I think a lot of that is overblown. Many of you know, but I practiced fasting starting around 2016, 2017, where I came out with an intermittent fasting journal. And just to share my approach and also help others with similar success. All in all, I think fasting is a tool. I think it can be used. Can it be overdone? Yes. And this is something that I quickly realized. And when fasting can be overdone is when it can wreak havoc on both your metabolic state and your hormonal status. So this is something to keep in mind. Again, I think it's a great tool to use maybe when you don't want to eat certain foods and maybe you're on an airplane or an airport and there's nothing healthy to eat at all and you just realize that I'm just better off not eating. I've touched on it with other podcast guests such as Brad Kearns, Jay Feldman, Georgie Dinkoff, so you can check those out. So I think metabolism is something that gets thrown out a lot and we're all looking for ways to increase it. And I think the big thing is just to stick to the basics. Metabolism refers to all of the chemical processes in your body that keep you alive and functioning. So your mitochondrial, which we hear a lot about now, ways to optimize your mitochondrial and ATP production. These are powerhouses that produce energy in your cells, and the rate at which they work is what determines your metabolic rate. So the higher metabolism means that your body can burn more calories and produce more energy efficiently, while slower metabolism may result in weight gain and decreased energy levels. So now I'm going to touch on some factors that can affect metabolic rate. One is your age. Typically, metabolic rate tends to fall about 1% to 2% per decade after the age of 30. Next is gender. Men generally have a higher metabolic rate than women due to a higher proportion of muscle mass. Again, this is a generalization. That's not true for everybody. Genetics can play a role. Most importantly is lifestyle choices. This is something that we can have the biggest influence on. And when we talk about nutrition, I've touched on this with many of my podcast guests in the past. Everyone wants to know sort of that one thing they should eat to increase their metabolic rate. And I think a lot of that is overblown. I think if you stick to the basics, being lean meats, wild fish, pasture-raised eggs, maybe organic dairy, these are great ways to get in your protein requirements. And typically for protein requirements, I like to say about 0.8 per pound of lean body mass. It's a great place to start. So one of the big things that protein gets talked about a lot about is the fact that it causes hyothermogenesis, which is meaning your body burns more calories to digest this food. Again, though, this is a small amount of affecting your metabolic rate, so I wouldn't get too caught up in that, but maintaining a quality protein with each meal, I think is a good place to start. And then from there, carbohydrates, which often get overlooked, I think in a lot of spaces, mainly the carnivore space and the keto space, but carbohydrates should be your primary source of energy. I think consuming the right carbs is helpful for not only metabolic rate, but increased CO2 levels, decreased oxidative damage, good brain function, muscle energy, and recovery. So without going into too much detail, I'll definitely leave a link in the show notes where I've talked about this with other guests on the show, one such as Kate Deering, who we got into that, Georgie Dinkoff, and so on and so forth. Next is healthy fats. This is something we've harped on a lot. I think if you can cook with healthy fats, that's a great place to start. Things like coconut oil, butter, ghee, tallow, great places to start. I've been using tallow a ton. It's just a great source to cook in, very neutral taste profile, and you can pretty much use it for everything. As we know, certain fats can help boost metabolic rate, improve cellular function, and regulation as well. So again, think of saturated fats as stable. Polyunsaturated fatty acids is unstable and oxidized with heat. We want to avoid those. Even coffee and tea have been linked to increasing metabolic rate. Compounds like caffeine can help stimulate metabolic rate, and I use it as a pre-workout. So instead of spending all this money on these pre-workout drinks, I think it's great just to have a little bit of caffeine to get you going. So those are some foods that can help boost metabolic rate. And again, I think it's about sticking to the basics. Things you want to avoid, obviously refined sugars and processed foods, alcohol, trans fats, and polyunsaturated fatty acids. Again, we've talked about that topic a lot on this podcast, but those are the main ones to avoid. Next, let's just touch on exercise. For one, strength training should be the priority and sort of the mainstay of your exercise programs, no matter the age. And I would say if you could aim for 2 to 3 times per week, that would be ideal. It's important to be consistent. And what I see a lot of people do is they add in strength training. They want to do it 6-7 times a week, and they just burn out. So stay consistent 2 to 3 times a week. weightlifting, resistance bands, whatever it is you want to use. I've talked about the X3 bar, which is something that you can use at home. That's a great resource as well. You hear a lot about high intensity interval training, and I will say this is something that you could throw in from time to time. You don't need to be doing it every other day. I know a lot of people like to go to these classes where they're doing these high intensity interval trainings and it's almost overdone, and you got to just be careful you're not overdoing it with this. I think I've talked about this in the past, but I like to call it high intensity repeat training, where essentially you are doing interval training, but you're making sure that you're fully rested going into your next interval so you can come back just as strong. These are short, intense bursts of exercise. This could be jumping a rope. This could be in the pool. This could be doing sprints if that's something that's up your alley, not for everybody. This could be on the bike, whatever it is. High, quick sprints. I do this sometimes on the road bike, which is like a lot of CrossFitters use that bike. And, literally I could be on and off that bike within like 7-8 minutes, and you have a nice high intensity interval workout there. So walking, I think, is great. I think if you could walk at a solid pace a couple times a day would be great. And then one thing that gets overlooked, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And these are pretty much the activities that you're doing outside of the workouts. So this could be, like I've talked about, even walking, gardening, just getting up and down the stairs. And this could be just doing simple things and getting up every 20 minutes and going and walking around your house if you're working from home. Just aim to move, right? We don't want to be sedentary for too long, and I think that'll sort of handle this category, because non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the things that you're doing outside the workout, actually can equate to about 15 to 30% of your overall metabolic rate. I've seen even higher levels, but I'm just being conservative with that. So those are the exercises that we should prioritize. And then as far as just main lifestyle adjustments for metabolic health, again, I think it's all about sticking to the basics. It's easy to get caught up in a lot of different sort of biohacks out there. I know I've talked about methylene blue, and that could be one thing that could increase mitochondrial health. But I think before you think about methylene blue, let's think about having quality sleep and making sure that we are, have a sleep routine. We're not eating too close to bed. We're making sure we have blackout shades, keeping a cool environment, and, perhaps reading or meditating before bed, doing the things to prep yourself to have a quality sleep. I think first and foremost. Next, managing stress. Obviously, chronic stress can increase cortisol. We all know how cortisol can play a role on your metabolic health and function. So make sure those two things are squared away before you think about going out and purchasing methylene blue or anything else. Once you get past those, then it's just about, making sure you're putting the things in your body that will set you up for success. And I've talked about diet a little bit. We're not going to get into all that today. A lot gets talked about hydration. I also think it's important to make sure that we're getting minerals and salt, and, drink when you're thirsty. I don't think there needs to be some set mark that you need to drink. You also can consume foods that contain water, like fruits and things like that. Prioritizing quality sleep, managing stress, maintaining hydration, and lastly, just building healthy routines into your life. And two things that come off the top of my head that I think of are daily walks and a daily meditation practice. Great place to start, and you can sort of build around that. And once you get those down, then you can add on. So that's the main thing that I want to touch on today. Stick to the basics. And if you're looking for support around helping to increase your metabolic rate and making sure that you're living healthy lifestyle routines, I'm offering a free 15-minute consult where we can talk, discuss some options, things that'll fit you best and help you get you going.